Insider details have emerged from negotiations between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump's representatives Stephen Whitkoff and Jared Kushner. In particular, Vladimir Putin's aide Yuri Ushakov stated that the talks were constructive and lasted a full 5 hours, but in the end, they didn't reach any agreements. And in addition to this, Ushakov also stated that the United States and Russia agreed not to disclose the substance of the talks in the future. According to him, the meeting provided an opportunity to discuss ways to further resolve the war, and the essence of the United States plan was discussed, not specific proposals. They discussed the prospects for achieving a long-term peaceful settlement, and both sides expressed their readiness to continue working together to reach a resolution. And representatives of the United States President conveyed greetings and best wishes to Putin from Donald Trump, Ushakov tells us. He also added that the question of whether Trump and Putin will meet in the near future was discussed. In addition, there are insider reports that now Whitkoff is leaving Moscow for Europe, and in Europe he will meet with Vladimir Zelensky to discuss something with him. But insiders tell us that Russia is stuck on 3 key issues. Putin does not want to give up Donbass, and Putin demands that the Ukrainian army be significantly reduced. And most dangerously, Putin demands that Europe and the United States legally recognize all Ukrainian territories occupied by Russians as Russian, in order, as he claims, to protect these territories in the future from the possibility that the Ukrainian army might want to take them back by force. So, let's sum up the meeting between Putin, Whitkoff, and Kushner in Moscow, discuss what is known from public statements and what is known from insider information. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave any comment, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link is in this video's description. And friends, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video.
A compromise solution hasn't been found yet, but some American proposals look more or less acceptable, though they still need to be discussed. Some of the wording that was proposed to us doesn't suit us, so the work will continue.
So, in the Kremlin, it was officially announced that the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the United States President's special envoy, Stephen Whitkoff, on a peaceful settlement in Ukraine was constructive. But a compromise specifically on territorial issues was not reached, and the parties decided not to disclose the detailed content of the negotiations. And so, it was not Putin or Whitkoff who came out to the journalists. They did not give any briefing. It was Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, who came out and made a statement. Quote, "A compromise solution has not yet been found, but some of the American proposals look more or less acceptable, but they need to be discussed. Some of the wording that was proposed to us does not suit us, so the work will continue. But this is really one of the most important issues." I should note here that the meeting in the Kremlin between Putin, Whitkoff, and Kushner lasted for 5 hours. And Ushakov added that the parties did not discuss specific wording but talked about the essence of the issues. Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, attended the negotiations, according to Ushakov. Putin sent Trump a friendly greeting and a whole series of important political signals. According to Ushakov, the participants from the United States side plan to personally report the content of the conversation to the president after a report from the embassy in Moscow. Another quote, "There were some things we could agree on, and President Putin confirmed this to his interlocutors. Some things drew our criticism, and the president also did not hide our critical, even negative attitude toward a number of proposals. But the main thing is that a very useful discussion took place. And most importantly, let me emphasize once again that both sides declared their readiness to continue joint work to achieve a peaceful, long-term settlement. In Ukraine, specific territorial issues were discussed, without which we do not see a resolution to the crisis." So unfortunately, the Kremlin has once again managed to get Trump to go another round of discussing for months just how much Putin wants peace. So much that they just can't reach an agreement. According to Whitkoff, Moscow received 4 more documents from the American side, in addition to Trump's original settlement plan, which were discussed at the recent meeting in the Kremlin. Quote, "We agreed with our American colleagues not to disclose the substance of the negotiations. The talks were completely closed and secret. We agreed that at the level of representatives, aides, and other officials, we will continue contacts with the Americans, in particular with these 2 people who came to the Kremlin today. I mean Whitkoff and Kushner." Well, here's an interesting question. What are these 4 additional documents? Well, since the Americans decided to classify their negotiations, we can only speculate, and that's why I can assume that. Well, the first option is the 28-point peace plan that Trump originally proposed, and the second document is the 19-point peace plan. That is the document that was revised at the meeting in Geneva between the Ukrainian and American delegations. Perhaps there's also a third document. This is an addendum to the Security Guarantees Plan from the United States of America. This is also kind of a separate document. What else could there be? What other 2 documents? It's hard for me to imagine. Maybe something related to the economic sector, because we remember that the Russians are very much involved. Well, in particular, Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's representative, was promoting the idea that in the future Russia and America should have very serious economic relations. Well, and maybe there's also some other document that concerns exclusively the Russian-American relations. But it's obvious that now this negotiation process is turning into a very, very long game. Because I want to draw your attention to the fact that Ushakov says they agreed to work through the aides of representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other agencies. Well, basically they agreed, once again, to negotiate endlessly. As soon as the Russians start saying that it's not possible to hold a high-level meeting, they say consultations between different agencies are needed. That's it. This means they're just deliberately dragging out the negotiations. Let me remind you, back in the spring of this year, Putin was shouting, "That's it. In Turkey, we're almost holding direct talks between Zelensky and Putin." He didn't actually fly there himself. Back then, when Trump set the first deadline, it looked like negotiations would begin, but Putin didn't show up. There were some strange maneuvers, and then the Russians said, when they realized Trump was bluffing, the Russians said, well, let's now hold negotiations in some working groups, consultative groups, and so on and so forth. Basically, this is just a clear case of dragging out the process, that's it. As for a possible meeting at the presidential level, it will depend on the progress of further contacts, Ushakov said. As a result of the negotiations, the parties are neither closer nor further from a settlement. Quote, "Not further, that's for sure, but there is still a lot of work to be done, both in Washington and in Moscow," Ushakov said. But here it's interesting to note that this has already appeared in the American media. And what's interesting here? Well, first of all, for example, Axios notes, this was Whitkoff's 6th meeting with Putin in Russia, but the first in-person meeting between Putin and Trump's team since the Alaska summit in August. In addition, Kushner joined the talks with Putin for the first time. According to 2 informed sources, Whitkoff and Kushner are expected to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Europe on Wednesday and brief him on the talks with Putin. On Tuesday, Zelensky said he expects to speak with Whitkoff and Kushner right after their meeting with Putin. It was also expected that the American envoys would present Putin with a revised peace plan reduced to 19 points during talks with the Ukrainians. And since, as a result of subsequent changes, this peace plan became more acceptable to the Ukrainians, it probably became less attractive to the Russians. And here it is also worth noting what emerged during the negotiations between Putin and Whitkoff, this statement that the Russians declare they will not cross 3 red lines. So for them, there are 3 issues that they will definitely insist on. The first issue is the question of Donbas. Putin demands the Ukrainian armed forces fully withdraw from Donetsk and Luhansk. The second demand is to reduce Ukraine's army. That's it. And the third issue, which wasn't there before, is that Europe and the United States should legally recognize all the occupied Ukrainian territories as Russian, that they should recognize Russia's sovereignty over these territories. I've already explained the whole logic behind such statements by Putin in a separate episode. To put it briefly, Putin is very afraid that these territories might be returned by military means in the future. That's why he's demanding such legal recognition. And finally, I'll add one more very important point regarding the peace process. It's China's participation in any future peace negotiations. In particular, there was a separate episode on this topic on my YouTube channel. I highly recommend you go and watch it in full to understand what's happening. Because there won't be any peace deal in this context. I mean, between the United States and Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, between Russia and Europe. There won't be a peace deal in these configurations, but most likely it will be in a configuration involving the United States, China, Europe and Russia, something like that, more or less. Because today, at the time when Whitkoff was meeting with Putin, there was another high-ranking official in Moscow, but from China. That's the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wang Yi. He was there supposedly to meet with Shoigu to discuss issues of cooperation between the intelligence services of the two countries, but that was all just a cover. In reality, he was there precisely to oversee how the Russians were conducting negotiations with the Americans. I talked about this separately in another episode, that China actually needed the Russians not to reach any agreements right now. Because very soon Trump is going to China to meet with Xi Jinping, and that question will definitely come up again there. In addition, today, December 3rd, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, arrived in China. And now it's obvious that China will try to negotiate directly with Europe, including about ending Russia's war against Ukraine. Thus, Europe is gaining the very strategic autonomy that Emmanuel Macron has been talking about for many, many years. Well, there you go. And accordingly, it was absolutely not in China's interest for any kind of peace deal to appear before Trump's visit to Beijing. On the other hand, Trump is also rushing to make some kind of peace agreement to show that he can do it without China's involvement. And China, on the contrary, is trying to show that without our involvement, you won't resolve anything there. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm discussing something else entirely. I covered this topic in detail in a separate episode, so be sure to check it out. Watch it if you happen to miss it. For now, I'll leave it at that, friends. I think there will definitely be some insider information and leaks coming out soon. So what are those 4 documents that the Americans handed over to the Russians? Because, well, they didn't spend 5 hours negotiating for nothing. And even though they agreed that these talks would be confidential, I'm still sure that some leaks will come out. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like the video. That's all, take care, goodbye everyone!